right, good afternoon, good evening. So we're here in the free, let's see, we got Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Kick, X, and X again. I just got to get the Discord started. So let's go ahead and set that up. Give me 2 seconds here, guys. Sorry, I just got to click a bunch of buttons. Feel free to get cozy. Give me just a moment here. Just takes like a half hour. All right, let me get the screen share started. I'll get the camera turned on in the Discord. I want to let everybody know in the Discord that I will be here. And I'll get rocking and rolling. All right, hello, people in the Discord. Are you guys able to hear me? I want to make sure that you guys have audio. This is mostly for you guys. Anyone that's not in the Discord, get the hell in there. All right, let me just move some stuff around here. I just want to make sure we can see stuff. Give me 1 second, guys. I'll be right. I am back. All right, let me get my camera started for the people in the Discord. You guys able to hear me? We'll get this part all set up, get a little confirmation. We'll be rocking and rolling here in a all right, looks like they can hear me. All right, so let me do some shuffling here. I got to get the screen turned over. Sorry if you guys can hear that. Hopefully you can't. There's a little background sound here. Okay, so you guys should see Discord, and you should see Notepad here as well. All right. So actually, let me see. Yeah, let's. Yeah, you know what? We'll just we'll go block by block here. So basically, we're gonna go from survival into thrival. I don't know if that's a word. And that's something that I think most people, especially people here in America, kind of don't. They don't know how to provide themselves with those kinds of opportunities. So if you're watching this on socials, feel free to like it, share it, do all that stuff. If you're here in the Discord, feel free to just comment no matter where you guys are at. Hopefully you guys can see everything. Now my camera is obscuring this top left corner here, so I'll have to move that down just a little bit just to make sure you guys can see it. And step number one here is just to make sure that you're financially secure, and that's always kind of the biggest obstacle for a lot of people, especially those living paycheck to paycheck. So we got to find some ways to break that cycle. Now this, obviously, I just kind of pumped an outline into ChatGPT just to help me word it out a little bit. But this is stuff I teach on a regular basis, and it's not just to teach, but to do, right? Now, for a lot of people, there's a pretty clear threshold, right? You're either okay or you're not okay. And, it's up to each individual to kind of identify that threshold and where they are in relation to it. And a lot of times it might seem a little bit discouraging, but it's not usually the end of the world if you happen to be on the other side of that. So we can fix that with some common sense rules and some common sense inventories of things. But if you are struggling, that's okay too. Like, it's okay to just be where you're at. It doesn't feel good, if you're not in a good spot, but it's okay to just know where you're at. Right. And that's kind of what I want to build in first. We're just going to go step by step into the areas where our focus should go. Now, first step, obviously, is to build a foundation. Okay. And that is to just get a budget. And I kind of went over this morning on my Rags to Riches live stream. It's a free stream in the Discord. And step number one is just get some visibility. Take inventory of your inflows and outflows. How much are you making, from the various sources of income? Do you have a primary job? Do you have a secondary job? Are you collecting benefits? Do you have do you sell stuff? What's your input? And, how are you monitoring that input? And are you able to adapt to changes, right? So if you don't have visibility, you don't know where your money's going, it's going to be very hard to move on to the next step, right? So step one, track all your income. That's always the best start, because then you at least know how much you have in your resource pool, to kind of spread around to the various areas. And sometimes you might have to prioritize expenses and things like that, maybe take a hit on something else. But if you don't have that visibility, you're going to have a very hard time, and the same thing is true with the market. If you don't know how much you're allocating for your positions, it's going to be very hard to trade consistently. So just getting a budget set up is always step number one whenever I have conversations with people about their money. And again, this is something everyone can do today. You don't need me for that. I don't have to log into your bank and look and see, how often you get paid and how much it is on average and blah, blah, blah. You guys will know that way better than I will. And the same is true for your outflows. This right here is probably the number one flaw in most people's financial management is they just don't track their expenses. And I know it's not fun, especially if you're just bombarding yourself with that information and just reminding yourself constantly that you're spending money. That's okay too. There's apps out there. You can use something like Rocket Money. That's a pretty good one. It tracks your recurring expenses, but you can also just use a spreadsheet or just, write it down on a piece of paper. Just look at your last, couple of months of your expenses and just write down the days, the description, and a dollar amount. And then that should take care of the bulk of your recurring stuff. I mean, mortgages aren't typically an annual expense. It's typically monthly. Rent is typically monthly. Sometimes you get weekly or biweekly, depending on your setup. But, I don't think anyone's really paying, their mortgage once a year, right? Because that's not good for your credit. So just getting a track of that, there's all those little expenses too, like Netflix and Hulu and all the subscription services. Your bigger recurring expenses, like your utility bills, credit card payments, if they're big, anything real estate, anything insurance policy wise, vehicle payments, things like that. It's going to be very important to track those because that's going to be your highest impact items. And then that's really where you're going to have to prioritize, the money that is within your inflow bucket. Okay. So again, if you don't have visibility of your inflow, it's going to be very difficult to manage your outflow. And if you have recurring payments and they're scheduled to overlap and things like that, and you don't have enough for that coverage, you're probably going to take a hit, and then that's going to cascade into other hits. Plus, then you got bank fees on top of that, and blah blah blah. Right? That's a nasty cycle. And I can't legally give financial advice, but I was homeless twice. Like, I get it. I worked fast food for a very long time. I get it. It's okay in some cases to just end a subscription or to delay a payment, call ahead of time and be like, hey, don't take this out just yet. I can, or do a partial payment or something like that. It's just a matter of managing your priorities and managing your money in a way that's least impactful in a negative way, right? We always want to minimize our risk and increase our efficiency in the market and out of the market. So let's say I've got $4,000 over the course of a month and I've got, $4,200 worth of expenses, but I need to eat. I might need to, prioritize eating over paying for, a credit card bill, for example. And that would suck, right? Because then the credit card bill's late, you get a ding on your credit. Then that balance carries forward as well. And there's all kinds of stuff there that we don't want to deal with, but you at least get to eat, right? So there's a little bit of a balance there. And there's also alternatives for eating and things like that. I know it sounds like an alien thing, but there are other ways to manage food budgets and gas budgets and things like that. So it really just boils down to you identifying your roadmap and figuring out how much you have coming in, how much you have going out, and then prioritizing within the outflow bucket what needs to be prioritized. And then anything you can negotiate makes you more financially efficient. And that right there is worth taking those little 5, 10, 20-minute phone calls to call every single person that you are obligated to pay on a recurring basis and just see if they can work with you on something, or see if there's a promotion running, or see if there's a way that, you can get onto a special program or something like that. Obviously, you got to be careful with some of that stuff so that you don't end up on like some weird, limited service. You don't want to get stuck in that stuff. So it's always good to just call around and do your research. But most people don't even pick up that phone. They don't track their expenses because they don't track their income, because they just live in the moment. And that's a survival mindset. And you can't have that if you want to grow, right? You have to survive first. And that includes eating, making sure that you have a place to sleep, making sure you have clothes so you don't die from exposure, making sure that your support network remains intact. And, then once you have that stability in place, then you can grow, and that's when you can focus on investing and building up from there, right? So how many people here, whether you're on social media or in Discord, just put a 1 in the chat if you have a solid budget, meaning you have a full understanding of your inflow and a full understanding of your outflow. Put a 2 in the chat if you've got a budget, but you don't prioritize calling and seeing if you can get discounts, disputing things on your credit, like you're not really super financially efficient. And put a 3 if you just don't have a budget and never really thought about it. Give me 1 second, guys. I'll be right back. Sorry about that, guys. We have some extra participants. All right, so let me also pull up this here. So I got a couple messages in the chat. Let me just catch up on that really quick. So the dude says that's hard. He missed our rags to riches. Sorry, I could write for 9 years. That's fair. Will I talk about investment suggestions? Yeah, I mean, I can't give you suggestions because that's also another word for advice. I can tell you what to look for in investments, and I can tell you how we approach investments. And then I can tell you kind of how to gauge for yourself whether or not something makes sense for you. But you're always going to have the last say in that because it's your money, your circumstances, your resources, and your future. It doesn't make any sense for me to just tell you what to buy, and then you maybe buy it, maybe don't, and then I get hit by a bus and you don't know what to do with it, So I'd rather arm you with education and insight, and then you can make your own decisions based on that. How much percentage out of budget do you recommend for trading specifically if I'm following swinging bull strategy? And again, Rutul, that just ties right back into the last answer I gave. Sorry, I didn't see that ahead of time, or I would have looped you into that. It really depends on how your portfolio is structured and how your finances are structured outside the market. Because if you're, let's say you make like $3,000 a month and you're putting $2,500 into options, do you need the rest of that money? Or, how are you doing in terms of survival and then growth? There's all kinds of things you got to consider, but it always starts with survival. So if anybody here is living paycheck to paycheck, or anybody here has ongoing debt that they don't control, or that they wish they could be more efficient about, like if you've got a 29% APR on a credit card, let's talk, right? Because there's better options out there. If you got that credit card because you were desperate and didn't have enough money to cover it, like eating, then let's talk, because that's it's the poor tax pitfall that we need to climb out of, right? What's up, Danny? I'm just chilling. I had to leave for the court thing today, so I wanted to make sure we got some extra time with everybody, especially going into the weekend. I want to talk about something other than just charts, because that's what people they fixate on a little too much, and sometimes it hurts them. So let me go through the answers here. So $5 Journey, Shin, and Christine all said 1. That means that they've got a solid budget in place. V. Michelle, how's it doing? Croyfish, Matster, and Takak, and the dude halfway said 2/3. And Breckle all said 2, meaning that they have a budget, but they don't make those phone calls, and they don't try to necessarily go for optimizations just yet. And then let's see, the dude had 2/3. And Mextred just said that they don't have a budget in general, and that's okay too. There's no wrong answer. I just want to make sure that you guys are aware of this stuff so that you can improve, right? That's the name of the game, is just constantly trying to improve. So if you don't have a budget, that is something you can do this weekend. So if you guys want to, send me what you got if you want. I don't recommend putting it in a public chat, and I'd never ask you guys to put your personal finances in there. But if you want to, just do it for yourself, but use me in my inbox if you want as a rubber duck, meaning that you just tell it to my inbox just so that it's said out loud. And then you'll have some record of your inflows and outflows that you can use. And then, I can help walk you through putting it into a spreadsheet and all that good stuff. And we can make like a mock one as well. I don't want to focus too much on the budgeting stuff, because that is something that's I can have a dedicated class about that. But the main point here is just track your inflows, track your outflows, identify the difference between the one-off payments and the recurring expenses, and just really track those recurring expenses. I just talked about it this morning. My wife and I, we are paying for Hulu twice. We just didn't track it because I didn't track her stuff. I track mine, but I realized we're just paying 2 Hulu subscriptions for no reason, and that's kind of silly. Yeah, this is recorded, Bendy. Fergie, I read the message you wrote and your name at the same time, and it got weird. Yes, this is recorded. Enjoy the event. And Tammy, enjoy that fire. Jeez, that looks cool. Trading got me the down payment of my first house. That's beautiful. Now let's focus on the next 30 years worth of payments, right? So again, I don't want to focus too much on this part. Now, how many people here have 6 months worth of expenses set aside for emergencies in case something happens and you lose your main source of income? Put a 1 in the chat if you do. Put a 2 in the chat if you don't. And we'll go from there. A lot of 1s. Good stuff. A bunch of lifers here tonight. The lifetime members. Good stuff. The dude says 2. Okay. And again, there's no wrong answer. I'm not trying to publicly add anybody. I'm just curious. Shin says, if I be honest for a minute, I think I have the budget part. I just have a hard time growing my account the way I want to. That's beautiful. Young Smitty as well on YouTube says 2. All right. Again, there's no wrong answers. Rosotic says 1. Matster says close, but not 100% sure on my outflow. So maybe. Okay. Do you have a good grasp on your recurring expenses? The primary ones like your mortgage, utilities, insurance, vehicle payments, and then your lesser ones like your subscriptions like Netflix and whatever else you use. Young Smitty recently lost his job. That sucks, man. Unless it was a terrible job, in which case enjoy the freedom into the next venture, right? But that's rough. That's disruptive, right? And that's always kind of, that brings a lot of uncertainty to the mix. And you specifically, if you just lost your job, your primary source of income, I assume it was your primary. That is where this, emergency foundation kind of comes into play, right? Because then you have that little bit of runway before you have to worry about finding income. But you said 2, so you don't currently have that. So I want to make sure that we focus on stuff. So right now you're probably gearing up for survival, right? You probably have expenses that won't stop, and your inflow has stopped or slowed down. So it's very important for you to prioritize that survival. Okay. Sorry, you guys are chatterboxes. I love it. Michelle worked 2 full-time jobs for like a year and saved the entire salary from the second job. That's awesome. Minus what the IRS takes, right? They want their cut. Tikak says mail carriers just got all that back pay. Everything is padded. Okay. Good stuff. $5 journey. Never had a credit card. Let me ask you a question. Why? I'm just curious. Like, what specifically has prevented you from getting a credit card up to this point? If you're a U.S. citizen, I should say. I can't speak for foreign countries and their credit systems and taxes and stuff. Tikak, everything is paid off except the house. I'm working on that. 100K left on it. That's good stuff. That's awesome. Beautiful. Brutal Trade, how to increase inflow. I will say number 1 is to decrease the outflow. Right? It might seem stupid. It might seem like common sense, but that is what sends most people upside down. There's just too much expenses. And I don't want anyone to go hungry or feel like they have to shower at the gym and stuff like that. That's all YouTube gimmicky BS. It's not real life. In real life, you got to eat, you got to be comfortable, you got to not live too high on the hog, but you don't want to sacrifice your ability to eat your food and have clothes, right? And to be comfortable in your home. You just maybe can't chase a lot of the stimulus. Like you can't eat Grubhub every day and go out to the movies and take the family out every day. It's just not every day, right? So just cutting back little pieces at a time, setting budgets and allowing yourself for discretionary allocations, that automatically gives you extra money to put into that inflow bucket because, well, not really the inflow bucket, but it's less coming out of the outflow bucket. So you have more to work with, and that increases your efficiency. So it's you'll build up that 6 months worth of emergency funds a lot faster. Then you can gear into credit building and investments and things like that. Okay. I hate having a credit card. Oh, your credit lawyer made you get one years ago. I keep it on 0. So Takak, you're doing something really smart. You're doing something that most people don't do. Now, who here believes that they need to have a high balance on a credit card or 30% on a credit card, which is the traditional advice to build credit efficiently? Tammy says, I charge everything on a credit card, but pay it off every month. Okay. Crayfish just got Grubhub. Good stuff. Credit scores around 840. Good job, Breckel. That's beautiful. You only need like a 760, but that's awesome. You're going to get hella interest rates, man. Ricky LaFleur, nope, I always pay it off right away, and it has built my credit nicely. Okay. Good stuff. Good stuff. V. Michelle, I pay mine to 0 every month. I just use it for the points. Oh, okay. Corey Fish usually maintains less than 30% on one card. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you think it's more efficient to keep a 30% limit usage on your credit card or a $1 credit usage on a credit card to build credit efficiently? I know the lifers and people who have been on my streams already know the answer here, but I'm just curious what most people think. The dude drowning in credit card debts, 765 score though. So you might have some options, man. It might be worth a call to your company. 850 got you beat. Yeah, I mean, I'll stay quiet, but you guys can duke it out. Rosada pays off their credit cards every time they get paid. Now they paid them. All right, good stuff. You get the cash rewards. It wouldn't. Okay, so Crayfish says, I feel like it wouldn't make much of a difference as long as you pay your bill. Okay. As long as you pay it off, it's probably smart to use a credit card. Okay, so here's how it works, right? There's 5 factors that go into a FICO score. Let me get into that here. Okay, so first off, everyone's stable and the crystal clearness of surviving first and then building a foundation second, right? Track your inflow, track your outflow, maintain some system so that you can watch where your money is going, right? That's always step number 1. Then prioritizing an emergency fund, 3 to 6 months worth of your expenses at the least, just in case something happens if there's some disruption in the inflow, okay? That's step 2. I'm not really going to stick too much to these numbers, but that comes after this part, okay? So eat first, get shelter, hydrate, right? Monitor and make efficient what you can. Make those phone calls. Don't let your pride get in the way. Just make some phone calls. Say, hey, is there an app or program I can get into? If not, that's okay. At least you made a call. You know, it's like asking out a girl. You got to talk to them. Right? You got to just suck it up. They're not going to come to your door and ask for a date. You know, that's not how it works. Then build up that emergency fund, and that keeps you out of this survival territory. And then you can worry about the next parts. Building credit. There is a literal poor tax, at least here in America. If you do not have a good credit score, you pay more over the course of your years, your months, your weeks, your lifetime, just to buy stuff and to use credit and to avoid using credit as well. And if you don't know that, do the math. You know, you can just compare yourself to, there's all kinds of tools out there on the internet that are free that kind of estimate loans and things like that. Just put in 2 different credit card numbers or 2 different credit scores. I'm sorry. Give me your credit card numbers and just see what the interest rates are. See how much that interest adds up to. It's thousands of dollars in, 50-point credit spread. Like I said credit spread. I just riled up all the options, kids. Sorry. But there is literally a tax that comes from not having a higher credit score. You don't need an 850 or an 860. That's good to have. It's super elite. Very few people can achieve that, but you need ideally a 760 or above if you want to get the best interest rates. Okay. So, and it doesn't take a lot to build to 760 plus. It just takes time. And there's 5 factors. I'm not going to go into all of them, but the 2 important ones are your utilization mix, your utilization ratio, which means that let's say you've got a credit limit. Okay. Let's say you're a brand new person. You don't have a credit card or anything like that. You never use credit. You apply for just a cheap credit card and they give you like a $300 limit, right? It's pretty realistic, pretty common. You don't need to use $90 to build credit. And in fact, you're going to build credit more efficiently over time using like $1 because your utilization ratio will be much more efficient than if you use that 30%. And that's one of the misconceptions that most people carry when it comes to debt and credit specifically, is that, you know, a lot of their parents heard and a lot of their parents heard, and it just gets passed down that you need to use 30% of your credit limit and blah, blah, blah. That's not true. As your credit limit increases, your credit usage shouldn't, in my opinion, if you want to be super efficient, right? Now, what is important is that you pay it on time after the statement date, okay? So you want the statement date to register. You want that reported to the bureau. They're going to say, hey, this person used X number or X percentage of their credit limit through this specific pathway. And then you got to pay it before the due date, because if you pay it after the due date, that's a late fee. It's a late payment, sorry, and that dings your credit. So paying on time is critical. Using as little as possible, but having access to as much as possible, that's ideal, okay? I want everyone to understand that, because I see a lot of people scared to use credit cards because they feel like they have to increase the amount of debt they have, and that's not true. If you're interested, I'm not sponsored in any way, I'm just saying this. I think Capital One has a credit building card. I think it's Quicksilver. It's specifically for people that are trying to build credit. If you have a lower credit score or no credit score, they give you a pretty low limit, but it's reasonable. And you can literally just go buy a candy bar once a month. Just buy a candy bar or a soda, or buy a banana at a gas station if you want. And then as long as you pay it off after the statement date, before the due date, your credit will build much more efficiently than someone that uses 30% of a $15,000 credit limit. And every couple of months, it's a good idea, in my opinion, right? This is all in my opinion, disclaimer time, to just take out another credit card. Now, the downside with taking out a credit card is it counts as an inquiry, which temporarily hits your credit score. But you have yet another account that's open at that point, so another established line of credit. And as you roll these over time, you can keep them all at zero and just maybe use one or two that you pay small amounts on. You know, you have the age of account, which is the other factor, right? Like a mortgage, if you pay on a mortgage for 20 years, your credit score is going to be nice as long as you pay everything on time. If you don't, though, that's a different story. But you have an age of accounts, that's an AOA, and that's one of the other factors. It's kind of a hidden factor in your FICO score. So if you're not familiar with how FICO scores work, I had a recording on it. I'll have to find it and I'll post it in the Discord as soon as I can. But I had a full credit breakdown for you guys. But before I go any further, let me just catch up on the chat here, because you guys are all talking a little bit. I don't want to miss anything. But building credit, does everybody understand the concept of credit? And is it scary now that you've kind of had it explained? There's no reason not to use credit. Okay. And I saw this a lot when I went in the Army. A lot of kids didn't want to touch credit cards because they didn't understand them. They thought that they had to take on more debt. They had annual fees. They had to pay interest on money that they were spending. And that's not always the case. There's healthy debt and there's unhealthy debt. My MOS was a 19 Delta. I was a Cav Scout in the Army. Cavalry Scout, for those who don't know Cav. Yes, sir. 12B. Good stuff. Did I give you the Army roll? I did not. Let's fix that right now, dude. Hell yeah. Good stuff. So then. So you went through, you guys probably had OSA, right? Or did you go in when that was, where'd you do your basic? Before Jackson for you guys? I went to Fort Benning. Either way, it doesn't matter. You were in the room. Okay. It's lost in the woods. So you were in the room with probably about 40, 50 kids, high schoolers, right? And you might've been one yourself at the time. I don't know how old you are. So I'm pretty sure you had your own set of discussions about finance in that room with those 50 high schoolers and college age kids. And they probably just didn't know much, right? And that's okay, right? Schools just don't prepare you for real life in a lot of cases. And that's no fault through the teachers. There's just a lot of stuff they have to squeeze in, and the curriculum doesn't always line up with the way the world works. So yeah. So how many of those kids went out and got that 27% APR on a Camaro? Your drill sergeant taught you some do's and don'ts. That's good. That's a good drill sergeant then. I know there's a financial briefings and stuff like that, but they don't really get into it. They kind of just shove you towards the TSP, which is a thrift savings program for those who aren't in. It's like a 401k for the military. Or I guess other federal employees are eligible. I'm going down a rabbit hole. So either way, long story short, you were in the room for several weeks, probably 20 plus weeks. I don't know exactly how long your OSAT was, with a bunch of kids that didn't know enough about finance and credit, savings and credit, right? They probably didn't have a budget. They probably ended up getting married on block leave and, and getting tattoos and going out and getting that Hellcat and probably getting in a lot of trouble with their money, right? And you know also that if you bounce a check in the Army, you get in trouble. They can Article 15 you for that because it shows that you're not financially stable, and that might take you out of combat readiness, which means that you've got another problem, right? So even in the Army, which is one of the most controlled environments in the training environment anyway, being financially secure is important. Yes, security clearance as well. You know, I didn't have a credit score when I went in because I paid cash for everything, and I couldn't get my security clearance for a very long time. That got in the way. It was an obstacle, and I had no idea. It is what it is. But you know, I was always in survival mode, and then I just paid cash. I skipped right over all this stuff. I didn't have anyone to teach me this. I didn't know anything about credit until maybe 20 years ago. You know, and then by that time, I was like, well, what the hell? I got all this cash. I don't need to take on debt to buy stuff, you know? And then, you know, I started buying property and I was like, wait, let's slow down. I do need credit. And I do need a credit score so I can get a security clearance for the Army. So let's work on that. Right. So then I started looking into it, and I shared a lot of the same concerns and worries that everyone else had because I just didn't understand it. I was going on bad information. You know, it's a very simple structure. You know, so when you're trying to build a credit score, there are credit builder loans out there that you can get a bank to give you. And basically it operates a lot like a CD in that they take, like, you take some amount of money, like $500, and you contribute towards it. So the bank basically says, I've got $500, but I need you to wait a year and pay me, right? And they basically put that $500 into a CD, which is a certificate of deposit, which just means that you can't access the money. So they loan you money, then they put it into a specific account for you. And then you pay that loan off to the same bank, and they just get their money back, even though they're holding on to it, plus whatever little interest. And then, you know, after whatever the term is, whether it's a year, 2 years, whatever, you have a year or two's worth of consistent payments, right? On-time payment history, plus another account. And, you know, it adds to your mix, right? Because the types of credit that you have or types of debt that you have also matter. It's a lesser factor. And then at the end of that year or whatever, you just get that money. You get the $500 plus whatever interest it's accrued over time. But more importantly, your credit score is increased if you paid on time, that is. Because what you've done is you've taken out a loan, you've paid it off on time, and they just held on to the money for you. So they just didn't give you the $500 up front. They just put it in a savings account for you. And then you just paid towards that loan, and that's it. So that one, like, that path does require paying extra. You are still paying interest on that. You collect some interest too. So it's offset, which is nice. But with a credit card, that's negligible. And ideally you do multiple types of this stuff. You know, but if you just take out a credit card and you buy a candy bar once a month, you pay it off after the statement date, before the due date, you're going to pay whatever interest. It's going to be, you know, 0% for the first year. And then maybe it's 20%, 30% if you don't have a credit score. Whatever it is, could be as low as 11%, depends. But you're paying it on a candy bar. What does it really matter? And that is going to increase your credit score as long as you pay it on time and you don't abuse your utilization. You don't max out all your credit cards. And then as time goes by, these accounts age, that increases. So that lowers the floor on your credit score. So the credit score just stays up a little bit higher each time. Ideally, you're strategically spacing out these inquiries to open new credit cards and to open a credit builder loan and things like that. And you have a diverse type of debt, which increases your mix, right? And then if you can just do all those or some of them, that will help your credit score tremendously, in my opinion, right? There's always got to be that legal catch, right? But that's how the credit system works. And that's why I don't want anyone to feel like they have to take out thousands of dollars or pay hundreds of dollars in interest just to build a credit score. You can build credit for free In a lot of cases, you just take out a credit card that's got certain parameters, like no interest, and then you get cash back and all that good stuff. And that'll offset that interest if you do it right. It's just a matter of sitting down, reading through stuff and learning it. And that's what I'm here for. I can help you guys with that stuff. I don't want to focus too much on the credit part either. But this, right? Remember up here, we had our inflows and outflows. And I answered, I think it was Shin, or maybe it was Rudol, said, how to increase inflow. And my immediate response was to focus first on decreasing outflow. And that's what we're doing by maintaining and building good credit, because there is that poor tax, which is just it's a constant decay of your financial efficiency. And that's the result of just not having access to good lines of credit. Does that make sense to everybody? And that's something you can fix for very little money or free. Okay. And that unlocks so many options for you. And that's where I want everybody to focus before they start looking at charts and before they start doing all this stuff. Focus on survival, right? Let's just run through it again. Survival first, then stability. Get yourself a roadmap of your inflows, your outflows, set up some sort of system, a very simple system to just track what's recurring, what's one-off. Your inflows matter as well. You can diversify and build onto those if you have spare time. You can convert your time into money. Improving your human capital so you can get better paying jobs and things like that. And then building out, this is your first investment right here, this emergency fund. This is a hedge. It's a protective put against your inflow, right? If that drops significantly, you've got this to offset that drawdown. Okay. Speaking of the stock market nerds right now, this is always going to be the first investment, is just having that padding. Okay. Then, or at the same time, we can start building credit. Like that, again, that's something everyone can do today. Everybody today, right? I'm not a big fan of concepts. I want specifics here. Every single person here can map out their budget today. That's something you can sit down for an hour and just track it out, right? Every single person here can apply for a credit card or a credit builder loan. You might have to wait till Monday because the banks are closed if you want to, but just focusing on your credit, just get your credit score. There's free services out there that will give you your credit score. A lot of banks are offering this now. If you log into your website, it usually shows you. That's there. It's accessible at your fingertips. That's something most people don't focus on because they feel like credit is kind of a scam. And I did too. Again, I thought the credit system was a scam for a very long time growing up because I didn't have information that helped me understand it. Okay. And then I saw the reality of it was that if I didn't have a good credit score, or if I had no credit score, I was actually just paying more for the same stuff as everyone else. And again, that just kind of brings us into good debt versus bad debt, and if you use credit strategically, you get lower interest rates, you get more opportunities, you get less obstacles in life, and that helps you be more financially efficient. And this is what it boils down to. The better your credit score is, the cheaper your access to capital is. Okay. So if you're a company and you collateralize your business to take out a loan, you're probably going to get a really low interest rate on that because they want you to pay it back. They know they have the collateral. So they're willing to compromise on an interest rate. If you can demonstrate as an individual that you're reliable, they're going to give you more money. They're going to prioritize you over someone with no credit score. Think of it like loaning money to a friend. I wouldn't loan money, a large amount of money, to someone I don't know if my friend that I know pays me back all the time is always there and I know what he does for a living. I know he pays off his debts. If he asks me for money, I'm going to give him money because I know he's solid, and he's more likely to pay me back. That's a safer investment, in my opinion. So I'm going to give him preferable access to that capital as opposed to someone that's standing outside a gas station, asking for cash. It's not good. So, and that's all that banks do. They just, employers, banks, all these places, they just look at the credit score as a measure of trustworthiness. I can't talk today. So again, just real quick, top to bottom, survival, get your roadmap. This is your first investment right here, this emergency fund. Then, or in parallel, building credit because that decreases your outflow, right? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And then we can get into diversifying and investing. And that is where we look at the stock market and all that other good stuff, different account types. So really quick, I just want to kind of run through that, but let me get through the chat first because you guys are putting gold in the chat and I'm ignoring it. I feel like a jerk. Sorry. Chase Sapphire. Yeah, that's another one. I think they're pretty good about their rates. I'd have to check though. Don't quote me on that. And yeah, college loans. That's a whole different horrible part of the American economy. And I could definitely go on for a very long time about that. V. Michelle, you don't look old enough to have just learned about credit 20 years ago. What were you, 10? I'll never tell. I've been around. $5 journey. When I bought my first house, they said I had amazing credit, just not a lot of it. Yeah. So the age and mix of account types. There's also a couple of hidden metrics, the kind of internal ones that they just kind of, they acknowledge it, but it's not like part of the official score. They also look at that stuff. So yeah, if you have what's referred to as a thin file, which I'm assuming is probably what they meant, then your interest rate goes up a little bit, right? This is all AI. He's the most advanced model. I wish I was a model. Let's talk about cheaper access to capital. Just be pretty. I'm just kidding. Freckle, so you're saying I can use 20% margin if I pay it off? That's between you and your bank, buddy. Your broker, I guess. Margin is different. It's same, but different. $5 journey. I was also caught off guard with how mortgage lenders sling around your mortgage to other financial institutions. Absolutely. So buying and selling debt is in and of itself its own separate little industry. And when you get up to a certain level in your trading and your investments, you're going to have to kind of find alternative ways to invest because you're going to run into liquidity issues in the market. And that is a very viable route. Just acquiring people's debt. And I was just talking about this, I think yesterday. I'm trying to remember what specifically the conversation was. It's going to bug me. Sorry, I'm not medicated. There was a specific conversation. We were talking about property and then using the property value. Oh, it was Austin. I think we were talking about Austin. No, maybe it wasn't Austin. Anyway, acquiring property and then using the collateralized value of that property to engage in debt, because debt is tax-free and assets depreciate and they cost money to maintain, but debt does not. And then buying and selling that debt around a network. I can't remember exactly what we were talking about, but I remember that was a part of the conversation, and that's absolutely true. Your data and your debt are two of the most liquid currencies in the American system. But dude, you're saying I should go get a new credit card. That's what I'm hearing. I can't tell you what to do. It's going to impact your credit score temporarily because it is a new hard inquiry. But they tend to bounce back pretty quick because they're very small. Unless you've got like a $200,000 credit limit. But I don't believe there's ever such a thing as too many credit cards, personally. I know that's kind of a wild claim, but I don't see any error in the FICO scoring system other than increasing your exposure to like identity theft. Multiple accounts. The only thing is it might dilute your credit type, your debt type, your mix. Give me 1 second. I'll be right. Sorry about that, guys. I was just given a delicious bowl of food. So also important. Sorry, I'm just trying to catch up on the chat. So I'm looking over here. I have the chat way over here on this other monitor, so I have to like lean over a little bit. I feel stupid, but let's take a look here. Crayfish. When I first bought my house, my mortgage changed like 3 or 4 times. Super annoying, changing login stuff. Yeah, a lot of banks do that too. They just rebrand, they change. A lot of them use the same underlying service. It's a service as a subscription as a service, and they have this underlying platform that they just kind of reskin for each bank, and it's just how they get you. But sometimes they swap, and they like even brokers like Webull. They switch clearinghouses every year or so. So they keep going, like, I can't remember what the other one was. It's not, my brain can only think of Omnibus, but that's not it. But now I think they switch back to Apex, for example. Banks do the same thing. They're just different variations of like underwriters and They do corporate stuff on their side. My problem is that Amazon is a monthly recurring expense. That's fair. Now let me ask you a question. How much of that are you using for your taxes, and how much can you use for your taxes? Because that's a little bit more advanced. But purchases don't always necessarily need to be bad, right? If it's blatantly, personal and not interest related, or if it's partially personal, you got to be careful. And I don't recommend anybody try to deprive the government of their tax money. But if you buy stuff that is genuinely for business purposes, like I have a bunch of computers that I just keep buying, and they have a 3-year depreciation window. I don't use them for personal stuff, and it's nice, but it's a small tax deduction that I get to use over and over again. And then I just sell them. So I circulate my own little tax deductions. I don't need to at this point, but it's just fun. I can plan it, but my wife is the wild card. Yeah, that's always going to kind of be the difficult part, is if you involve other people that don't have the same mindset and the same insight, right? And that's just a matter of, sitting down and having a conversation and be like, you're not giving her allowance. You're just setting a budget up for you guys as a couple, right? And you need support from each other to make sure that you can stay accountable, and it will ultimately benefit you. But that's more like marriage advice stuff. So it's kind of tough. And if it's, a conversation that's too difficult, or if it's just not going to happen, you just got to track your inflow separately. And that's it. It's just one of those things. It's circumstance, things just happen sometimes. But if you have your spouse and other people in your network on board, and everyone's got the same goal, and everyone's able to commit to it, then you'll have a much better time. Walmart Plus is definitely not just groceries and household things. Tammy says, so true. Interest rates are high now, but for many years when we bought a vehicle, we got a 0% interest rate. Absolutely. And there's pros and cons to low to no interest. And that's kind of where, we kind of have to adapt every 10 years or so. It's crazy. It's cheaper to buy a new $60,000 car than a used one from a dealership for half the cost. Yeah. So with cars specifically, you want to look for the liquidity in the market. So we got a Subaru WRX. We had a 2022, I think. I think it was 2022. And then the dealer actually offered us a 2024 last summer for a lower monthly payment. And we just do it for the payment reporting. So we do the credit thing. But yeah, we actually got a cheaper payment on it because they needed to offload more of one car, and they were looking for the 2022s, and we just happened to have one. So it was a pretty cool little trade out. But that's another, just pick up the phone and call people and ask, like, hey, what do I have that you want? How can we work out a better deal between you and I, me as an individual, you as a company? There's always something that can be talked about or asked about. Ricky LaFleur, I looked at credit in a negative way as well. I've always maintained the rule that a credit card does not allow me to afford more. I just filtered my standard purchase through credit cards and get cash back and build credit. Absolutely. And that's all it is. You're just using the credit card for what it is. It is an established credit line, and we want to use very little we want to have a very low utilization ratio, because that improves the efficiency of building that credit score, right? Think of this like float. The lower the float, the more each little move is going to count when it comes to that credit score. All right. So now that we've got let me just kind of run through this really quick. Sorry, I won't read every single comment out loud. But there's a good conversation, so I'm glad we're having it. You're saying pay off mortgage before investing? No. I mean, I can't legally say yes or no, but for me, no. I will always have a mortgage, because that is a multi-decade account that doesn't just disappear after a year when you pay it off. It is beneficial to have a lengthy age of account and at least one larger account on your credit score, because that is one of the factors that really builds that really pushes your credit score up over. And, if you want like an 850, 860 credit score, you're going to need some older accounts because that's kind of the only way that your score can actually get up that high. So I wouldn't recommend trying to pay off a 6-figure mortgage and then try to get into the stock market because A, you're going to compromise all that credit score juice, and B, that's less capital you have to work with in the meantime. Now, I'm not saying you should just take money that you would normally put towards buying a house and put it into the market, because that is always risky. And that's where, disclaimers up the wazoo. I can't tell you what to do, but, especially if you can't demonstrate consistent profitability in the market, that money's probably better off going to the mortgage, But there's nothing to say you can't put that same amount of money into a high yield savings account or some other form of investment, and then setting up an automated payment just to cover the mortgage payments, so you get that consistent payment history and age of account, plus the high interest from the high yield savings account or whatever other avenue you go down, and your house just gets consistently paid off. I mean, there's all kinds of tools and pathways that we can follow, and that's why it really depends on you as a person, right? I can only walk you through what I do, and I can walk you through your options, but I can't tell anybody what to do. But hopefully that makes sense. $5 journey, they sling around debt so they can have cash to offer more mortgage loans. Absolutely. It's what is the term? I always talk about it. It's the fractional reserve banking system. It's the availability of cash and the circulation of cash. I, for some reason, can't think of the term off the top of my head. Wow. Money flow. My bad. It's money flow. And that's, so you deposit 100K into a bank. The bank takes 90K and loans it out to someone else. And then that person that got the 90K loan puts that in the bank or pays on something, and that goes into a bank. And then that bank loans out, 81K to someone else. And they set up this series. There's a formula for it. Starts with a G. I can't remember the name. But there's a specific formula for the max return on that for the banks. And that's 10% is kind of a guide. It was actually reduced to 0 as a minimum back in 2022, I think, for the banks. But they used to keep about 10% on hand in case people wanted money. But yeah, the fractional reserve banking system is its own little monster. I'm getting super far down a rabbit hole right now. But these are good conversations. I like that you guys are talking about this stuff. But yeah, a bank's role is to make sure that people have access to money and as much as possible, as frequently as possible. Your role is to make sure that you pay as little as possible to have that access. Okay? That's the correlation there. Bank wants to make sure everybody has money in their hands as much as possible. Only the people that are solid investments. And then your job is to make sure you don't pay more than the next guy to have that same access. Okay? So, sorry, I know I'm going down the hole here. Buy, borrow, die. Absolutely. You take out insurance policies, and then you use those insurance policies of a certain type for a loan of a certain type. That money from the loan is tax-free because it's debt. Your insurance payoff, covers the loan into maturity, and then you could just live on that money basically as long as you pay off the minimum payments until you die. So a lot of people can do that, put that into passive income. It pays, it grows, and they just have it, and then it's set up for the next generation. It gets more efficient over time. So it's a whole generational wealth strategy. But again, I've had live streams about that stuff. I don't want to go super far. You guys are out typing me. I love it. But this is, so maybe you guys want to talk more about this stuff. I like it. I already have too many, the dude says. If I'm getting a new one, it will be a strategic balance transfer one, not getting the one at Academy. Fair enough. I assume you're talking about credit cards. And if that's the case, credit cards are a double-edged sword, right? A lot of people don't really have much of a choice. So they end up putting most of their expenses onto a credit card when they have one, because they take credit cards out when they run out of money, right? They start to borrow money, and that's a dangerous hole to fall into, because if you have a 30% interest rate on money that you just didn't have, not only do you have to pay that extra amount, but then you got to pay 30% on top of that as well the next month, and it just cascades and it gets horrible. And then you get a late payment, your credit score drops. Next credit card, you get a lower limit, higher interest rate. It just gets ugly. And that's a cycle that traps a lot of people, unfortunately. I don't want that for you guys. Tammy says we have a lot of credit cards, but just basically use one and pay the balance off every month. Absolutely. When we get the notice every few years that they're going to cancel one for inactivity, I charge something on it, and then we're good for a few more years. That's perfect. That's how you do it. Just get yourself a candy bar. Just pay it off. It doesn't take a lot. Where's it too? Yeah. Matster, I definitely need to do better with business expenses. And that's where, if you're at that level, it might be worth just having a conversation with a CPA. Let someone else who's gone to college for that stuff and has all the liability, walk through it step by step and really just see if they can identify anything you might have missed. Now you're going to have all the information, obviously, so it's important to talk to them efficiently, but they know the loopholes. It's just a matter of getting them to focus on your stuff sometimes. I want my house paid off and get a new ride. I don't like a lot of bills. My ADD will forget something. Absolutely. And that's where you can, again, there's a lot of services out there that are either very cheap or free that kind of manage that stuff for you. A lot of banks have, like auto pay features and things like that as well. A lot of people use them. A lot of people don't, and that's okay. It could be something as simple as setting up like Google Calendar. I remember the old school method where, you go get paid, you take your cash, you take your check, you cash it, and then you just put money in envelopes and you leave it on the counter in your kitchen, and then you just mail it out when it's time, right? But now everything's electronic. Everything is just there. We have so many alarms and reminders. Escrow has nothing to do with your mortgage payment. That's money you pay for your insurance and taxes. They can't hold extra money in the account, so they rebalance and send you the difference. Absolutely. So that's another form of a savings account. Your insurance and taxes must be going down. That's a good thing. Yeah. So if you can get tax reductions and cheaper insurance, and you get those distributions from an escrow, that's pretty good. And then you can use that for amortization. You can pay off the mortgage, the principal a little bit early as well, or at least pay it down so that your payments are smaller and you have less to pay on the in terms of the interest, which is good. But a bank isn't going to let you pay like $1 a month for 30 years on a mortgage. But you want to get that number down as little as possible. And that's where it's important to just call the bank and see what they can work with you on if you have extra. Or again, just put it somewhere where it's going to build, a high yield savings account or something, and then just set up automated payments if you want. Just be completely hands off. Extra money is extra money. Doesn't mean you have to spend it. The trick is to never, ever screw up, just like a stop loss. My credit issues were only a handful. Yeah, that's rough. And once you, if you stumble financially, it's not always the end of the world. I know it might feel like it and it might suck. I'm not even going to say it does suck. Like, I've been homeless twice. I get it. It sucks. But there's always a way back. Okay. And sometimes you got to make compromises. Sometimes you got to swallow your pride and make certain phone calls. And sometimes you got to file things that you didn't really want to file. And, number one priority is making sure you can eat and you have a roof over your head as much as possible. And if you have to go without Hulu and Netflix and all the smaller subscriptions, that's at least, $20 here, $20 there. That's food, It's a payment towards a higher interest credit card that you can pay down sooner. And then you take all that extra interest money that you would have spent on that credit card and you put that back into Netflix later or something. Maybe you watch stuff on YouTube or you steal someone else's account. I mean, again, I don't want anyone to feel like they have to compromise their quality of life too much, but, it's the duplicate spends and the stuff that we just don't track. Like if you got, like I said earlier today, if you got like a $250 payment that you pay like once a year and it just sneaks up on you because you forgot to cancel it, that's something that you could have avoided just by monitoring it and keeping focus on your budgets, and that's something where, it's not too late. Everybody can do that today. You can start it. You can absolutely build your credit back. It doesn't take forever. It takes a while, but it doesn't take forever. Matster, I've been where credit cards were used as a crutch, built debt, and that is a nasty spiral. Absolutely. The poor tax, it's like overdraft fees. If you don't have money and you try to buy something and you go negative, the bank charges you money because you didn't have money. It's such a stupid concept. I get it, but it's stupid and it's predatory. That's as far as I'll go with that. But credit is the same way. If you make a ding, right? Let's say you take a hard inquiry and then you maybe miss a payment, boom, that could be 50 points off your credit score. It goes quick sometimes. And then if you miss one payment or you get one late payment, then you get another one, then something goes to collections because you weren't tracking it. Maybe you moved, didn't get a notice in the mail or something like that, all kinds of stuff. So sorry, let me just read through this really fast on my own. I'm not going to read out loud and respond because I don't want to get too far off track. How old are you cashing envelopes? I've been around, Michelle. That was the old school budgeting. Microsoft money years ago. Yeah. And there's QuickBooks, there's all kinds of stuff. There's a lot of banks, a lot of that underlying service that I was talking about. A lot of that's run by the same service, and they usually have automated payment stuff in there. And part of that can be transferring stuff from one account to another, including mortgage accounts and things like that. So there's tools out there. It's just a matter of finding out what's best for you. I don't escrow anything. I put money into a HISA. Do you have a mortgage? You just paying your taxes and insurance raw? Calendar press it. What's a HISA? That's a perfect question. So that is a type of account, and that's kind of what I want to talk about now. So everybody should be relatively familiar with retirement accounts. There's 401ks, IRAs, Roth IRAs. There's backdoor IRAs when you get higher up in the dollar amounts, because the lower IRAs have contribution limits. You can only contribute so much and match so much. But there's special types of IRAs on the side. There's also, right, if you think about these are effectively just bank accounts, but you have them with a broker or with an investment firm. Okay. Now, there are different types of bank accounts and other assets, other instruments that you can use as well. One of them is a CD. That's a certificate of deposit. One of them is a bond. We're all familiar with those. So when the interest rates are higher or lower, you're going to want to transition between CDs and bonds. Okay. When interest rates are increasing, bonds tend to do better. Unless I got that backwards. I'd have to check. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. That's what I do anyway. And then there's HISAs, which is our high yield savings account. Most savings accounts get you maybe a 2% yield. High yield savings account typically gets you like 4 to 5%, maybe sometimes higher. So it's a little bit less efficient than a 401k, but without the volatility as well, right? Because you don't have any raw holdings there. If you use a CD, you lock that money up so you can't access it. So you become illiquid for that period of time. Usually it's about a year. But you get a better interest rate than a savings account. So a lot of people prefer that. If you take out bonds, they have a maturity date. You get the best payout if you wait for the entire maturity. But you can access those sooner by selling them. So if you need cash, let's say person A and person B, one opens a CD, one gets bonds, right? Person A can't touch their money at all for like a year. Person B can get rid of their bonds and free up some cash. So that's kind of where that difference is. And then that's just separate. It's just different types. Well, the CDs specifically and high yield savings accounts, those are just different types of accounts, just like the 401ks and IRAs. And then of course you have investment accounts that are non-tax advantage. So like IRAs, for example, those are typically, you pay your taxes when you withdraw your money. They're typically tax shielded, depending on the type, obviously, and I don't want to go too far into that. There's mutual funds as well, which is different than a 401k. You can't day trade on a mutual fund. You can just buy once per day. But in an IRA, you can day trade all you want as long as you don't exceed your limits, right? And then you just pay your taxes when you withdraw that money or pay some other fees. It's an account, so there's going to be a fee schedule. Credit lawyer, how do you open an IQ identity account? No one can do anything to your credit with that. Well, yeah, to an extent. And there's always something you can do, but I get the sentiment. It's worth that. Oh yeah, so sorry. So yeah, now we're just talking about diversifying and the types of accounts, right? So your number one investment is always going to be that 6-month emergency fund. Then you're going to be contributing towards your time, right? Time and paperwork towards building credit. And if you want to contribute into a credit builder loan, you can do that. If you want to take a credit card out every 2 to 3 months, just grab a new card and buy a candy bar and pay it off so it reports, but it's a very low cost. That's a great way to build credit. If you want to invest into a 401k, IRA, or Roth IRA, these are not reporting. They don't report to the credit bureau. So at this point, we're no longer dealing with credit. We're dealing with investing and building wealth. Okay. I look like I'm 12. Yeah, I could see that. I act like I'm 12 too. Oh yeah, the coin jugs. I remember those. We always had one on the landing. Can you lift it? Nope. Let the bill collectors grab it when they come to the house. The one thing they'll never take. I do. I definitely do. The best jokes to laugh at. All right, so okay, so we've got 401ks, which are employee retirement accounts. Then we've got individual retirement accounts, which are ones that you contribute to. There's limits, and those are typically with investment firms, and then they match, and you can do all kinds of stuff depending on what type it is. There's a bunch of different types of IRAs. Most people just stick with traditional or Roth IRA, and then once you get up into the multi-figures there, then you deal with backdoor IRAs and foreign accounts and things like that. So you got your emergency fund, you got your credit score cooking. Then you got maybe a credit builder loan going on in the background as well. You're making consistent contributions to that. It's very low cost. And then you want to build a retirement account, get that passive income flowing and just get it growing, right? The most stable type of investment for most traders or most investors is going to be just straight up index funds and ETFs. That's just the traditional advice. I'm not giving you guys that advice, but that is a great place to start before anybody even looks at a chart or before they start looking at company metrics and stuff. Index funds that do well and ETFs that do well, they take a lot of the work out of it so that you can focus on learning and building education and paper trading and doing all the fun stuff that we want to do without risking real money, right? And while you're learning that, you can build out a portfolio structure. Just like you balance your budget, you figured out your inflow, your outflow, everything has an allocation and every allocation has a purpose, right? You allocate this much money to keep your lights on. You allocate this much money to use your internet, which you need your lights to be on for. You pay this much to keep the roof over your head so that you can have electricity and you can keep your router dry and then you can have internet, right? So there's pairs, okay? And your portfolio should be the same way. If you have a long-term stable investment and you're buying shares of it and you don't want to sell it after the course of a year, your router is wet because you lost your house and your power got shut off because you didn't allocate properly. And it rained. Or your sprinklers came on because you over allocated in your irrigation and it just went nuts because I don't know, you didn't allocate properly. But if you got this long-term stable quality investment that you want to keep and you don't want to ever sell any shares because you got all the faith in the world that this thing's going up and you can justify that, but you need something to offset your gains at the end of the year, then you would take on something that maybe is like a high yield, like a yield max ETF, where it just converts cash. You just buy a bunch of shares, it converts those, it provides a bunch of cash in the form of dividends, and then you reinvest those dividends either into the yield max shares so that you get them free sooner, meaning they reduce your cost basis to zero, or you reinvest it into your longer term quality investment, but you want to sell those shares for a loss in most cases so that you can offset the capital gains from your other investments. And that's where tax loss harvesting and things like that come in. And we'll cover all that later on. But the root of that should be baked into your diversification plan. And that's kind of why with the Rags to Riches, we started with the yield max stuff and we started with some quality investments like J&J. So that way everything is it's like building a deck, card deck. You got certain types of cards and you got other types of cards. You just pick the two from the best, two of the best for each category, and then just build your hand. And then you can also incorporate bonds, real estate, and alternatives. And that's where you get into things like loans and things like that. Insurance loaning, insurance lending, and all kinds of other stuff. CDs, HISAs, they kind of count in this in terms of financial diversification. But investments, that can be anything. You can be a Reg A investor. You can be, there's all kinds of ways to invest. Futures, for example, futures crypto. If you want to get assigned on futures and you want to deal with the merchandise and the inventory, that alone is its own specific sect of futures that most people don't want to deal with because they don't want to deal with the physical stuff, the commodities, for example, because that requires storage and all that good stuff. And there's some advantages in doing that, but people don't understand it enough to do it efficiently, and it's a lot of liability, so they avoid it. But If you're diversified properly and you understand it because you took the time to learn it, there's a lot of money to be made in there, and there's a lot less competition. So it's not bad. Just like credit, if you take the time to learn about it, it's not bad. It's not scary. If you take most of your money right off the bat and you build up this emergency fund, your very first investment, then a reduction in inflow becomes a lot less scary because you have 6 months to figure it out rather than one day, or you get fired on a Friday. You got to figure it out by Monday. That's why that's your first and most important investment. Then building your credit helps with every future investment. That's your offset. Okay. And then you've got your consistent contributions into retirement accounts. You've got index funds, ETFs, passive dividend growth, compound reinvestment, things like that. You're well diversified. Everything makes sense because you took the time to learn it, and you're not just trying to scalp SPY 0 days and trying to hope you make it. And you will see that your risk tolerance will change over time, and it should. If you're older, if you're nearing retirement, that's not the time to take 6 figures and throw it into SPX and hope it sticks, because you want to buy a house. If you already got 6 figures, you already have enough to buy a house, or at least start the process. You just have to know you just don't know what you don't know, right? And this right here is the specific action that we can all take. Focus and prioritize building consistent long-term wealth before trying to beat the market. And this is where a lot of people tend to close the stream and they turn their heads off and they just don't want to hear it. If you are not able to be consistently profitable in the market, most of your money should not be going into the market, in my opinion. You can paper trade, you can practice, I can help you with that, but I don't want to see everybody just ignoring all their other financial stability. I don't want to see anybody not having an emergency 6-month fund. I don't want to see anybody having a 420 credit score. I don't want to see anybody having, an empty bank account because they tried to get into the market and it didn't work. Okay, so please don't do that to yourselves. And again, I can't legally tell you what to do, but I can tell you that this is a sometimes thing for many people, and this is a much more achievable most of the time thing for most people. And this is just responsible financial decision making. And then I want to get into the speculation part of it, which is the fun part. That's where everybody kind of wants to be called 911 as an assault. Oh no, I'm talking to past versions of myself. We've all been here. We've all done this. And no offense, but you're not special. I'm just kidding. It's human nature, right? The system is designed so that you feed right into that. And that's what people do. I'm kind of an expert. So my goal is to help you break that cycle. So when and only when you are able to say, yes, I am properly diversified, I am hedged against inflow disruption, I am building my credit score in parallel to all these things, I've got consistent contributions into a diversified portfolio that's structured, and I'll get into that here in a second. Now I've got a little piece of it for speculation. Let me pull up my Miro here. I'll just pull it up over here in case there's something inappropriate. I'm just kidding. Pull up this one here. Okay, so let's talk about portfolio structure. And I know the rags to riches people, you guys are probably going to tune out at this part. But if I'm making consistent contributions every week, every month, whatever I can swing without compromising my quality of life, I still want my hot pockets. My portfolio value will grow just like a savings account, right? That's kind of a no-brainer. If you're not losing money, you're keeping money. And if you keep adding money to the money you kept, it will grow. And then if we put some ratio, I use 70-30, but if you use some ratio where the majority of it goes into investments and the smaller amount goes into speculation, this should outperform this early on. Once you figure it out and you stop bleeding. But this is where we make the real money, because this is where we get something beautiful, which is compound reinvestment. Sorry if you guys can't see that clearly here. But if I make consistent contributions, my money grows passively just by having a savings account. I put most of that money into investments. Those yield some sort of return over time, whether it's in the form of dividends or share appreciation that I sell and rotate out. I take those profits and I reinvest them back into that portfolio. Now I have 2 forms of money coming into this portfolio. That is mine from the money that I earn working, and the other one is money that my money makes by working in the market in the form of dividends and reinvestment. So this will grow faster, right? It's not just me dumping $50 a month in, it's $50 a month plus maybe 2% or 3% a month, just over and over and over again. Maybe it's 8%, maybe it's 12. It depends on what you invest in. And then on the speculative side, okay, since we're not selling the investments unless we want to cycle them out, but we should only be doing that for a profit. You can also add layers of protective options on top of that and speed the compound reinvestment process up by getting paid to place orders and doing the wheel and things like that. So make sure you guys are paying attention to Bull. Actually, I'm going to put that link right here. Put it in here, and I'll put it in here in case anybody isn't in Bull's coaching program or hasn't heard about it yet. He teaches the spreads and passive options and the wheel and all that good stuff. The man's a savant. And if you've got money, you should be in that program, in my opinion. But the money that's left, the speculation, that's the fun part. We then structure that, right? So the investments have their own structure. If I got Johnson & Johnson, I want to offset that with a yield max. So I can sell the yield max. They're disposable armor shares to protect my Johnson & Johnson, because the Johnson & Johnson is going to make money. I need to sell something to offset that capital gain. So I don't know taxes on it, but I still keep those shares that are increasing in value. Plus my Tesla shares are just paying themselves off over time. Okay. So there's just a little bit of strategy that goes into it. And then with these consistent contributions, I can also take small pieces of that, like 30% of it, and then I can speculate with that. And that's where we get into day trading and swing trading and stuff like that. So, if I want to do 2 trades per day, like I do, I can use the 1% rule or set aside some dollar amount per trade. And I can say, okay, well, based on the risk size, the magnitude of risk on this trade, I can kind of adjust that up and down. I can build a structure for my position sizing. Oh, excuse me. And then that alone helps me control my risks, my losses. So if I just use the 1% rule blindly and I want to take 5 trades a day, let's say I'm using this size account. These are just placeholder numbers, but let's say $20 investment with a 2% return on a 1% risk. Okay, so I use a 1 to 2 risk reward ratio, and I take 5 of these trades. Boom, 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 boom. I will have a finite number of outcomes, which is 6. I'll either end up with $2 positive or $1 negative, and somewhere in between that's an even number and some multiple of 20 cents. Okay, and that's because that's the maximum possible number of combinations of these 5 trades with a 2% profit or a 1% loss. And this is one iteration. Okay. So then if I take the loss, if two of these outcomes are negative. So if I take a 40-cent loss or a $1 loss for the day, those become tax advantages. Those are capital losses. I can use those for deductions on my taxes as long as I don't wash sale and compromise it. Okay. They disallow that. But that frees up after a while. So that's another live stream. But if I make profits on this first iteration of speculation on these 5 trades, then I take that and I reinvest it. And then I say, okay, well, tomorrow is a new day. And let's fast forward to tomorrow. Now I've got $20, whatever, blah, 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 plus the profits from the day before. And I still want a 2% loss or 2% profit or a 1% loss for that day. And that compounds over and over and over again. So if you get 3% profits in a row, you're up 39% because of the power of compounding. You get that extra 9.39%. If you lose 1% 10 times in a row, you're down 9%. So you save 1% or 0.5% or something. I think it's like a 9.69%. And there's going to be little inefficiencies because of share price and you can't fill if it's $1.99 and you got a $2 thing. Now, again, these are placeholder numbers, so don't put too much faith in that. But the power of compounding is a very real thing. And that's why I said the speculation should absolutely outperform the efficiency of these investments over time while your account is growing. And then over time, the amount that these investments are bringing in are going to outperform the speculative amounts because you're going to run into maximums that you can trade with. You're going to have liquidity obstacles, and you're not going to be able to get filled on a low float stock if you're trying to trade with $250,000. It's just not going to happen, right? Because your prices will fill. The price will go up, and then you become exit liquidity because everyone else wants to sell for their profits. And then where are you going to sell? On the way down. And then it goes down, and you're trapped. And that's why, again, there are limitations for how much you can do in day trading. That's why I tell everybody, day trade, you can be a successful day trader, but that's not how you're going to make your money. If you really want to get into the bigger money and really make it work, you got to start with passive income, because that allows you to just keep buying stuff and just keeps growing and growing and growing. It's a stupid cycle, and I love it. But it's not going to be here. It's not going to be on day trades or swing trades. That's not how you're going to make your money if you want to get 8 figures, 9 figures. And none of this is really efficient if you've got all these external pressures like, oh, I got a bill now. I got to take out half my portfolio to cover my bill. Or I got to pay a little extra on this every month now because I didn't have a good credit score and I have a higher interest rate than I want, right? So over time, it's important to restructure as much as you can, restructure so that you're constantly more and more efficient. And then, when you get to this point, this little machine right here, it gets pretty stupid. And that's what I want for you guys. But you can't get to that point if you're still stuck up here in survival mode, right? And if you can't track your inflow and outflow, you're never going to get out of survival mode because you're going to be constantly bombarded with these new surprises. And then if you don't have an emergency fund, any disruption of this inflow is going to put you off track. You're right back in survival mode. So think of this like a staircase. Every step up you go, if you misplace your foot and you don't have the steps below you to catch you, you're just going to fall. So this is always the ground floor, survival. Then this is the first step. This is what allows you to get off the floor. You have to be able to track your inflows and outflows. This is what allows you to stand up and climb to that next step. And if you don't have this in place and there's a disruption here, you go tumbling down the stairs again. And then this right here, building credit, allows you to avoid the poor tax because you have a credit score and you get cheaper access to capital because the banks view you as more trustworthy and they're more likely to be friendly to you when it comes to loaning money. And if you don't have that in place, then your expenses will be a lot more impacted if you don't have the emergency funds when there's a disruption in your inflow, and boom, you're back in survival mode faster and more aggressively. And then if you're not properly diversified and you can't move money around efficiently, shifting balances specifically, you're going to have a very hard time. And especially if you're just ebbing money out because you're trying to figure out the speculation stuff and you're dumping more in there than you are into a savings account or an IRA or some sort of stable diversified portfolio structure. And you can't quite figure it out, but you want it real bad, you're going to have a hard time. Okay. Then and only then can we build into the speculation stuff with intent, right? And there's no rule that says you need to risk real money to learn how to trade. If you start paper trading today, and I talk to you a year from now, and someone else starts today with real money, and I talk to them a year from now, guess who's more likely to be in the market a year from now? It's probably not going to be the other guy. Okay? Especially if he's tracking his inflows and outflows and realizes this ain't working, and he wants more efficiency so he's more motivated to get out of that survival mode. He wants to build stuff. He wants to grow. He wants to get to the point where he's using this or something similar, right? Because he understands the advantage in building that compound reinvestment and the advantage in using the losses as a benefit at tax time so that his refunds can increase because his deductions increase and he gets a more efficient tax refund. And then, this guy is constantly just shoving the profits into passive income. And that's where you get to the point where you can just live off dividends and passive income and passive options. And it's just very nice. Okay. And then you can start venturing out into other forms of investment, like side businesses, peer-to-peer lending, for example. We talked about shuffling people's debt around, debt and data. There's so much more money in that than there is in the market. And once you view money as a tool, and you know how to put it to work for you, you'll have a much better time in the market and out of the market. And you'll take a little bit more, there'll be a little bit more bitterness to taking unnecessary losses once you view it that way. And if your goal is to when you're in the speculation stuff, if your goal is to get in when the price starts moving in the direction it's going to make you money, and it's to stay in as long as it keeps doing that, and to get out when it stops doing that, you should have a pretty good time in the market. But we tend to complicate it a lot more than it needs to be because we want it to be complicated. Okay. Because then we can blame circumstance and all that good stuff. So let's change our mindset. And that mindset starts with identifying where we're at. Are you in survival territory? Are you trying to, feed yourself? Are you trying to make sure your bills are paid? Are you covering every expense you can think of with whatever resource you can think of? Are you running out of sellable stuff? And if that's the case, do you have a clean budget? Are you aware of all your inflow? And are you aware of all your recurring outflow? versus your one-offs? You know, do you have a yearly thing that's about to surprise you that you don't know about? If you pay for, let's say, TradingView, it's $650 if you do the yearly one. I think, is that worth canceling and re-signing up at Thanksgiving, for example, for that huge discount? Like, there's all kinds of little things we can do. Did you call your utility company and see if they have any programs you can get into? And every dollar you save in those allows you to build this emergency fund investment faster. And then once you build that out, then you can start, well, I mean, you can start building your credit today. It's not a big deal, but you can start paying down your high interest credit cards so that your utilization score improves, and then your credit score improves, and then you can get a higher limit. And it's just every level has compounding effects that just ripple through all the other layers. And that's where I want you guys to focus. So for right now, in terms of specifics, I just want everyone to make a budget. Just track your inflow and outflow. If you already have one, great. Then focus on your outflows. Is there anything you can make cheaper without necessarily losing it? Are there any duplicates or anything that you're just not using anymore that you could cancel? Is there anything that you are using that you've paid for a very long time that you might be able to get cheaper? Maybe if it's switching to another company or getting onto a program or some sort of promotional offer, it's worth it, right? And then do you have that emergency fund? You know, how's your credit score? That's something you could build right now for free. Like, you can build credit in a way that pays you if you get the right combination of card features, and then cancel it and then do it again a year later, right? So within, you know, a year or two, you can build a credit score very, very efficiently for free, and then technically you get paid. Okay, so it just takes a little bit of wizardry, and that's not going to apply to everybody, but it's possible. And then you can start building out your retirement accounts and things like that. Just diversify and build your structure. And then you can get into the fun stuff, and that's where everybody kind of wants to start. And that's why people tend to get hurt. Okay, so with all that said, I'm going to catch up on the chat here because you guys are going nuts. I see Lee's in here now. Ooh-wee. Let me make this bigger so I can read faster. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to throw this over here so it's on the screen. All right, let me just scroll up here. Damn, you guys typed a lot. I love it. Yeah, there it is, fart jokes. That's where I left off. Find money almost daily on the ground roots. Yeah, I used to pick up cigarette butts for gas stations, and I'd clean up parking lots for restaurants, and they would throw me like a cheeseburger every now and then. But I'd always find change out there. I used to work at a movie theater. I found so much money just chilling on the floor. I found AirPods, alcohol, all kinds of stuff. I didn't use the alcohol, but just found it. I found all kinds of stuff. That's funny. Hello, Snake. Quantum computing will make crypto sketchy. That's an interesting discussion. I'd be down to have like a podcast and just talk about the impact of quantum computing and AI and crypto. Why didn't I tell you this 25 years ago? I did. My window was open. I don't think you heard me because your window is probably closed. This is when I was verbally assaulting you guys. Oh no. Keep saying 6-month emergency fund like I could build that before I die. So if you're in a tight spot, right? If I had to give advice to somebody right now that was struggling to eat, okay, I would say you're probably in survival mode, and tracking the inflows and outflows is probably absolutely critical at this point. And then either cutting, reducing, or replacing any outflow that you don't absolutely need or will impact your quality of life severely. Because a lot of times there's just inefficiencies in there. There's stuff we just forget to cancel, right? That's, you know, when I set up, I've been selling things for a very long time, and a lot of the strategy is to just price things at a point where people will just forget to cancel it because it's not significant. But if you've got 5 of those and they're, you know, $7 or $8, that's $35 to $40 a month that you're just wasting, you know, just because you forgot to cancel it. You know, so that little bit can help if you're in that survival mode. That might just match the interest rate on a high interest credit card or something that you don't necessarily need to pay. Nice. There we go. There it is. So this is the impact of just being consistent and just letting this machine work. Now, he's not doing speculation on this account, so we can kind of rule all this out. This is mostly just the investments and the passive income being reinvested with consistent contributions. That is a beautiful thing. And this is excluding net contribution. So this isn't money he's depositing and it's going up. This is the value. So this line here is the value. This is net contribution. So that gap right there is profit. I love seeing that. Thank you for sharing that. Matster says, I don't know why you do this. It's awfully amazing to have someone like you around and in my life. I don't know if you're talking to me, but I do this to help. I'm not here for the paycheck. So I'm here to help you guys. My brain immediately thought this was Drunken Master with Jackie Chan for a second. I'm thinking about taking HISA funds that just sit there, taking monthly deposits to cover homeowners insurance and taxes, and depositing that into an account I can run calendar press on. It's a strategy. Don't worry about that when I have money. Yeah. And, side hustles, things like that. There's always something more we can do without destroying our quality of life. I don't want anyone to go out there and get 3 jobs. It's not the economy for that. And you're not going to be efficient. If you really want to make like short-term money, if you have a skill, you can probably tutor online and get a lot more money than you would driving people's cheeseburgers back and forth, or proofreading papers, or something you can do with AI and just copy and paste it and then paste it back. There's always something you can do on the internet at home in very little spare time. It's just a hard thing to start, but once you get into it, it's not too terrible. Do we just research dividend stocks the same way we do regular equities? No. So that will be a separate discussion. We'll have to talk about that next week. I know I kind of said this is a pop-up here, but we've been going for a little while, but I got to get downstairs and I got to eat this food. Oh, it looks delicious. But no, there's specific things we look for in dividend stocks. I have a video in the Rags to Riches playlist that helps. There's 2 videos specifically. So basically, you want to make sure that the company's making money, that the board is willing to share that with investors, and that the market is willing to appreciate and invest in those companies. So some factors there, but we'll get into the specifics of it. Florida's trying to home tax. Yeah, that's weird. I don't like so many economic elements being politicized. That's dangerous. Sorry, let me just scroll down here. Yeah. Dividend history. Yeah, V. Michelle, we will definitely focus on that. I'll do a lifetime thing on Monday with you guys. Trade $500,000 on watch list every day. What are you talking about? You get that must have been when I was talking about that liquidity. Oh man. That's why the prices go up, because Lee keeps getting filled. He's just getting chain filled. So thank you, Lee. Sorry, guys. I'm just trying to get through this as fast as I can here. All right. Matt's are going to shore up his budget this weekend. This is beautiful. I love it. Let's do it. Everybody do this. Everybody just take a minute. Just log into your bank and just download the last, like from January to today. Just download it and then go back 1 month at a time and just plot out your recurring expenses. That's the easiest way to get started. And then also just to identify stuff you don't use. Playing Madden against my dad on PS4, and then meeting her hungover at church next morning. That's a hell of a meet and greet. Utility company would find more fees to charge if you call them. Yeah, I could see it. Mine's pretty steep, but is what it is. There you go. Roommate. So stranger, roommate, spouse. That's the trajectory there. Satan's Grendel. Oh. All right. We got to get past some of this stuff here. Can you help me find that kind of side hustle? Absolutely. Everybody has some potential on the internet. I know it's kind of like the American dream and the roads are paved with gold, but the internet has so much potential for those who know how to tap into it. Yeah, Master. It's a strategy. There's always something that you can do on the internet to get money without committing so many hours and so many, talent points, if you will. even honestly, like one of the easiest ways to make money while you're here, at least, is if you know anybody that wants to join, like PB, for example, we have an affiliate program. It just pays you. I think it's like 15 or 30% or something like that. Every member can do that, even if they don't pay for premium. Everyone has access to it. So that's kind of an easy one. You know, if you just post your profits, or if you have friends that just want to know about financial stuff, like the conversation we're having right now, that's an easy way to just get it in. Now, I'm not the sales guy, so I'm not saying that in an attempt to get sales. You know, obviously, I believe everyone should be here, but that's not. I want you guys to make money if you're going to be bringing people in. You guys, it's just an easy little side hustle. Y'all want me in? Oh no, I'll pass it up the chain. I don't have control over any of that. Yeah, Fergie owes you money. Let's go with that. Let me. I do gotta call this. Yeah, I'm not the sales guy. I'm not. I don't push sales. That's not my jam. When I worked at the video store, Hollywood Video, our store was top performing. Like, we're not the reason the chain went down. We did really well. But that was always my approach. Is, you know, we had what was it, the power play thing? I think it was like $10 a month, and people would come up to the counter with 2 movies or whatever it was, and sometimes a snack. And I said, hey, you know, we got this promotional thing. You know, it's going to save you money today because it was cheaper than 2 videos. And then you also get a free rental on top of that. So it's like, it's a no-brainer. So yes, I'm going to tell people about that. And then my boss tried to tell me to like sell something else. I was like, no, absolutely not. I'm not going to rip people off. I'm not going to like shove things in their face they're not going to use. And that's the approach I have here. If I don't believe something will benefit you, I'm not going to put it in front of you. And that's just how it is, because I want you guys to be financially efficient. And that includes not spending money on stuff that doesn't have value for you, you know? So I'll leave it at that, but just understand that although I do objectively have a shared vested interest in promoting things, I'm not the sales guy. I'm not here for a paycheck. This is not how I make my money. I didn't mean to laugh that much as I said that, but like, it's a Discord, you know. I'm here for you guys. So let me end the live streams and all that good stuff, and then I'll hang out here for a second with you guys. I appreciate it. I was not expecting this many people to show up on a Friday night. So I'll leave it at that. So thank you guys. I appreciate it. Let me end the stream and I'll hang out in the Discord.